Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to today's Africa Startup Law Accelerator 2023. My name is Wilson Wahome, Research Consulting and Advisory Lead at the Lawyers Hub. And today I am joined by...
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juno Kal. I'm the Senior Manager responsible for stakeholder engagement at ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you, June. So for today, this is the launch of the Africa Startup Law Accelerator 2023, which we will be diving into as the program proceeds. But as a starting point, I will call on Rispa Onyango just to give a few quick comments. Karibu, Rispa.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm getting feedback. Okay, that's better. Is it? Can you guys hear me on your end? Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Rispa Onyango. I'm the Digital Policy Lead here at the Lawyers Hub. I'm standing in for our CEO, Ms. Linda Bonyo, who's unable to join us at this time. However, she does send her regards, and we are really excited to launch this cohort of the accelerator. I think given the vibrant nature of the ecosystem, as we have seen with, more and more people are adopting the use of tech, more and more people looking to be innovative within the space. We are having more governments also thinking through issues around the regulation and what policy should, or what that means for the ecosystem. It was definitely a creation of the Lawyers Hub to make sure that the main stakeholders, being the startups, are then not left behind. Seeing as in many ways Africa is catching up, but then it's also tailing in that, for example, in terms of the number of startups that are able to move from, say, the early stage to the growth stages, those who are able to move from Series A to B all the way up to C. In comparison to other spaces, I think Africa still, remains to be like a growing space. But then because of the nature of, whether it is the benefit that we have with our young population, whether it is the growth in the penetration, the internet penetration, the mobile use, whether it is also in just the adoption of the digital policies and digital emerging issues and the conversations around there, then we are seeing that we are having more and more people actually then venturing into this space. We are getting more and more startups being funded. We are getting more and more sectors actually seeking to participate. I think fintech is currently still leading the curve. Legal tech is trailing behind in comparison to the other sectors. But I believe that this is one of the issues that we thought, we could be able to then leverage on and hopefully assist or participate within the ecosystem. And so the fourth cohort of the Africa Startup Law Accelerator seeks to do just this, to offer a space whereby startups can be able to come in and gain some training, gain some knowledge, interact, and even collaborate in just trying to pursue the different forms of engagement within the space, cutting across, not just Kenya or East Africa, but then looking to see how we can bring the South Africa, we can bring the West Africa, and also the Francophone space, which is usually, again, left behind a lot within these particular conversations. And so with that, we are very excited to see the benefits or the opportunities that are going to be resulting from this particular cohort. We have worked with amazing trainers in the past and also wonderful partners, the like of Mozilla. We have worked with EID Bank. And so we're excited to see what that would also look like for this cohort going forward, and what opportunities that they can then begin to leverage as a result of this. And so the next 6 weeks will, definitely be something that's eye-opening on your end and also on our end as we engage with you. And hopefully we can then be able to allow that multi-stakeholderism and allow that consistent engagement, across board for the duration of the time that we are going to be together. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to my colleagues. And once again, welcome to the cohort, and we're really excited for this.
Thank you, Rispa. So as Rispa has rightly indicated, we are really excited to have everybody on board. Of course, we were looking to have a huge engagement in terms of our continental approach, and we are glad that we see participation from people from Nigeria, Uganda, and even South Africa. So that's really a fantastic thing. I think at this point, what we will probably do is just give a bit of background in terms of the Startup Accelerator, how that has looked like over the past 3 years as we move to our 4th edition. So I'll request Ken if you could just help with sharing the screen so that we can give a brief overview of the Accelerator thus far and why we needed to have this sort of platform for startups on the continent. So I do hope that everyone can see our screen. And as a starting point, I think the biggest question that we need to ask is, why do we need to have an accelerator, or why is an accelerator needed, at least from the Lawyers Hub perspective? And this has, I think Crispa has also mentioned, this has been motivated by the fact that there has been a huge gap, as we've seen it, especially in terms of legal tech innovators and legal practitioners. So there are so many innovations out there, but their rate of adoption has been somewhat on the downside. And so what we are looking to, or what we're hoping to achieve with the Accelerator is just bridging this gap between the legal tech innovators and legal practitioners, and obviously helping the legal tech startups and the startups that we're going to onboard just to sort of move to the next level. So in terms of what we are looking to achieve is obviously, one, accelerate the business growth of these startups. We want you guys to upscale. We want increased revenues. We want increased customer base. And so those are some of the things that we really are keen on in terms of helping startups move from one level to the next. Something else that we're also keen on is just helping you understand the legal dynamic in terms of compliance and setup. So what does business incorporation look like in your respective countries, or even across the board? And at some point, I think we're also going to be looking at how you can upscale your businesses beyond the continent. And so if you want to move to another jurisdiction, a foreign jurisdiction as it were, maybe it's the US or Europe, how would that then look like for you as a startup? We're also keen on operational capacity, just helping you grow in terms of the number of people you have or you're working with at a startup level. And this is also obviously going to be linked to the level that you're at. This accelerator is sort of tailor-made, or it is designed for early stage or growth stage startups. And so we want people who can come up with legal tech solutions and justice innovation solutions. So however, I think even beyond that, there are quite a number of startups that perhaps may not be within this particular space. And so that is not to say that you guys are excluded. We're obviously looking at helping you upskill. But I think when we began this journey, this was what our area of focus was designed towards. So as we've been mentioning, the Accelerator has had 3 previous editions, with this one being our 4th. And I think the 2022 version was perhaps our best one yet. We will obviously look at the results of this once it is done after the 6 weeks are over. But just to give you quick highlights of the 2022 program, what that looked like was that we had fantastic collaborations with partners from across the globe, including the European Investment Bank and Adam Smith International. So these partners really helped us to sort of grow and tap into the startup ecosystem within the continent. And so this was a really good thing. And in terms of participation, we had well over 120 startups from all these parts of the continent. I think we had participation from more than 15 countries across the continent. So it was really huge, because we've noticed that as the years have been going by, the participation has also been improving and increasing. And so we hope that we're yet to get the tally of the statistics in terms of who has signed up in terms of country representation, but we do hope that this year is going to be better than last year. So in terms of coursework, some of the things that or some of the areas that we focused on in the 2022 program was company formation and structuring, as well as intellectual property. So these are just some of the areas that, again, we'll also look at or look into, because I think we've seen that there are quite a number of startups that have indicated that they have problems with company formation in their respective countries and things like intellectual property. So this is not everything that we're going to look at, but just a snapshot. So there are going to be other areas that we're going to explore, but these are just a few of them. So this one is, again, just a country representation or a mapping of the countries that have thus far participated in the Accelerator program. So as you can see, in 2020 and 2021, we had well over 100 startups signing up. In terms of countries, in 2020, we had more than 11 countries. 2021 and 2022, we had about 15 plus countries. So there has been a gradual increase in terms of the startups that are participating from respective countries. And so I think our goal is just to sort of harmonize or unite all the startups, or a good number of startups, at least within the continent, and get as much representation from the various countries as we can possibly get. In terms of how the program is going to be structured, or what you're going to delve into, I did mention that two of the areas that we've been focusing on in the recent past has been company formation and intellectual property. But beyond that, we also want to upskill you, or we want to train you in various areas, including things like business structuring and legal compliance, which I think we mentioned. Product development is also something else that we are really, really keen on, helping you attain or achieve. Having you or helping you with your commercial strategy. How is that going to look like for you in terms of upscaling, in terms of moving beyond your respective countries' borders? Marketing and branding, things like scaling and investor readiness and fundraising, which I think has also been a sort of issue that has been raised by quite a number of startups, that we have this great idea, we have this great solution, but it's very, very difficult for us to get fundraising, or it's very, very difficult for us to get investors. So we also, at some point during the Accelerator or during the program, we'll also try and go into how you can fundraise, or how you can tap into the fundraising sort of ecosystem. So something else is, probably some of you may be asking yourselves, so what are the benefits of this accelerator? Maybe you have not heard of it before, or maybe I believe for a good number of you, this will probably be your first time joining the accelerator. So some of the benefits that I think we can sort of allude to is, one, we will try and get you to tap into the Lawyers Hub community. So as Lawyers Hub, we've made a name for ourselves, and we are obviously quite big on the continent. So we've partnered with numerous stakeholders, including lawyers, partners. And so these are just some of the people that you will tap into, because I believe it may be somewhat difficult for you to reach out to lawyers in various parts of the continent. But because we have partnered with lawyers and with ecosystem partners within your respective countries or jurisdictions, we'll also try and link you up with these people, so that if you want to take your startup to the next level, if you need help with legal compliance or anything else that might need sort of legal assistance, or you might need even things like funding. So we want to link you to these people, and we'll also try and secure as many tech events for you guys as possible, because this is also something else that is very, very critical in terms of helping you grow, maybe beyond your borders, or as you're looking to venture into other parts of the continent. So we will help you tap into the Lawyers Hub community. Then the Accelerator also offers you the opportunity to showcase the startup at the annual Africa Law Tech Festival, which is something that we've been doing every year. And typically what happens is that we have hackathons that happen during the Africa Law Tech Festival. So if you believe that you have a great solution and it is in line with the year's theme, please feel free to participate in the policy hackathon or the tech hackathons that we typically have running concurrently with the Africa Law Tech Festival. Then something else that will obviously be a benefit to you is that we are going to ensure that, we tailor make, trainings that are very, very specific to you, so that if you are looking for a specific issue to be addressed, then how can we address that within the program? So that's also something else that we anticipate will also be beneficial to you. And again, something else that has been pointed out by a good number of startups is just how do we then appeal to investors? How do we appeal to funders? So we are going to ensure that your startup is investor ready, as we like to say. Then we also talked about the premium legal advisory services and business support that will then help you tap into from within the community. And lastly, business coaching and mentorship, which is huge, because you might have a startup, you might be compliant with all the legal and regulatory compliance needs, but you need somebody from within the business landscape to help you navigate the dynamics of the startup ecosystem. So this is something else that we really want you guys to benefit from, and we hope that at the end of the program you'll be able to tap into. So in terms of what will success look like for you guys at the end of the 6 weeks, which we anticipate to be somewhere at the end of January. So we would like you at the end of this particular program to have achieved quite a number of these things, because this is probably just what we would like to call a phase 1 of the program. Moving forward, we hope that you will use the knowledge that you will gain to then take your startup to the next level. So we would want you to have increased customer base and increased revenue, which is something that I am sure is a sort of pain point for everybody. How do you generate customers? How do you increase your revenue as a startup? So we hope that the training that you can get from this, you can then use to appeal to customers and in turn help raise your revenue. We also want you to help. We also want to help you improve the user experience of your product. So I'm sure a good number of you are probably in the tech space or whichever other space you are in, and you're not sure how receptive users are to your product. So we are also going to try and help you just gain traction in terms of getting reception from users and just understanding how well suited your product is to the market. We also hope that we can help you increase your operational efficiency in your business, and as well as just help you formalize any registration that you might need in terms of incorporation, legal compliance, because as we said, a good number of us at the Lawyers Hub team are lawyers, and I think even the trainers that are then going to be joining us for these sessions, we do have quite a number of lawyers who will be conducting the master classes. So we hope that you will then gain an understanding of how you can register your respective entities, or which are the best entities that are sort of properly suited for your operations. Then we also wish that you also acquire a network of potential suppliers and customers, because this is something else that is probably tied to increasing your customer base and increased revenue. Again, gaining a greater relationship with investors, and just enjoying continental exposure and visibility. These are some of the things that we hope that, even if it's not at the end of the 6-week period, because this is probably just going to be a sort of a training or an upskilling of how you guys are doing in terms of your startup. But beyond that period of time, these are the eventual outcomes that we hope will accrue to your startups. Yeah, and I think that would be an overview of how the Startup Accelerator program is going to look like. What are some of the expected outcomes that you guys can expect, even if it's not at the 6-week period? Then beyond that, how can you sort of move or transition your startup to the next level? So we hope that it's going to be an enriching experience for you, and we do hope that it's going to be also an enjoyable ride for all of you. So I think we'll just dive right into the next session, which is going to be sort of led by June. Karibu, June.
Thanks, Wahome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We don't take it for granted that it is Monday, beginning of the month, probably end of day for some of you, but then middle of the day for others. So thank you for joining us, and we're very happy and excited to have this conversation. So one of the buzzwords that we've had in 2023, and I say this as OpenAI marks a year, I think they just marked a year end of November, which was November 30th, is artificial intelligence. For a long time in the ecosystem, we kept talking about AI, big data. What other buzzwords were there? Blockchain, privacy, security, data protection wasn't too big, but then has become big post GDPR. But I'd say in the last year, artificial intelligence has taken the lead. And so that's the conversation that we'll have today. We'll speak about how to use AI in terms of empowering the startup ecosystem and what opportunities there exist there. So we do have two panelists joining us today. I'll put Fahome in the spot for a minute, and I'll ask all of us to introduce ourselves. But then also, seeing as it's November, I mean, it's December. Seeing as it's December and end of year, what's the one thing that has surprised you in the tech ecosystem, or what's the new buzzword that you have taken note of that did not make sense at the beginning of the year? I'm happy to go fast and set the tone. So my name is Juno Kal. I am a lawyer. I practice in Kenya, qualified in Kenya. I am a proud member of the Lawyers Hub. I also serve as the senior manager responsible for global stakeholder engagement at ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. We manage the technical resources of the internet, so you're welcome that you can access the internet thanks to us, partly. I cover Eastern and Southern Africa, and the one thing that has stood out for me this year, or a new prompt is, or rather a new word is prompt engineering, which is essentially a different kind of engineering that is enabled and facilitated using AI, right? So when you go to ChatGPT, for example, or Bard or Bing, if anyone uses Bing, when you enter certain words and certain phrases, the more information you give the model or the more data you use to train it, the better outcome and output it gives you. So prompt engineering is my surprising word for 2023. Wahome.
Okay, prompt engineering, that is also a new word for me, I guess. So my name is Wilson Mahome. I am an advocate, qualified to practice in Kenya. I am the research consulting and advisory lead at the Lawyers Hub. And for me, this year, I think ChatGPT has really grown this year. It has, I think at the start of the year, it sort of just exploded very, very exponentially. And so it was at that point that I came across the term generative AI. I was like, so what do you mean this generative AI? What exactly is this generative AI? So, I found that typically how AI works is that, you will feed it a bunch of information, and then when you are making a query, it will then sort of collate all the information that it has been fed and then generate content and give you that content. And so I think it was also surprising to discover that there is not only text generators, but there's also image generators, and these images are actually quite nice and they're quite good. And so I think it would be interesting to see how that unfolds in terms of just how not just the text is being used, because I'm sure everybody these days just uses ChatGPT, but images, how are these images going to be used? So I think generative AI has been the sort of buzzword for me.
Nice. Olga.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olga Chichoncho, and I'm the co-founder of Arch Africa. We are using the power of storytelling in order to define the African narrative. My background over the past couple of years has been around ecosystem building in the tech space in Uganda and Africa at large. But I've recently stumbled upon the creator economy, so I'm trying to leverage the learnings from this side of the world to add value to the creator economy. My buzzword for the year is Afro-optimism, which is really around the positive narrative around Africa emerging. So very excited to be here and maybe also share some of my learnings from that side of the world. But yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Olga. Over to you, Jared. No pressure.
I was just going to say, now I went last and everyone's used all the nice big words for 2023. But yes, my name is Jared Poole. I'm head of community with the South African Legal Technology Network. And we focus on the discussion of the intersection between law and technology. Always great to be with Lawyers Hub. Good to see you, Aome. And yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for this conversation as well. If I had to choose, leaning slightly on what Baome actually said, I'm going to go with big data. I think GBT was one of those words that really crept in this year. And now that everyone sort of understood that, now comes the issue of training GBT models and how are we going to do that effectively. So big data, I think, is definitely going to be a nice buzzword, especially leaning into 2024 as we try to refine all of these LLMs and teaching them how to more accurately provide us with the feedback we want, depending on which sort of industry we find ourselves in.
Okay, well said. Thanks. So we'll just dive right into the conversation. As Wahoma was presenting, point number 3 of one of his slides under the topic expected outcomes was to, gosh, I've forgotten.
You've forgotten.
Oh my God, please take us back to the slides and go to point number 3. But it was around operational efficiency. I have remembered. It's December, guys, it's December. It was around operational efficiency. So I'm keen to hear from our panelists. What are the opportunities that you have identified or that would be good to take note of for founders, startups in terms of artificial intelligence? Are there unique value additions that they can leverage upon? Are there new opportunities that can be adopted and taken into the business operations to make things easier? Any thoughts on that? Olga, I don't know if you want to go first.
Sure, I can go first. I think when it comes to operational efficiency and artificial intelligence, it's very interesting. Like the past 3 months, I feel like my life has just been thrown into this discussion. And again, coming at it from previous experience in the innovation ecosystem. And, I used to work at the Innovation Village. So overseeing a number of startups, grow from idea to concept and business phase, then moving on to Wave, then moving on to Future Africa. So different facets of the ecosystem. And now with, this hard pivot to the creator economy. I'm just fascinated with the different narratives around AI. So on the one hand, it's like, oh, the machine is coming after our jobs. And on the other hand, there's a lot of optimism around how it's going to increase productivity and help, startups be able to tap into different market segments that will help them, save on costs and increase, their sales and improve their operational efficiency. But I think for me, I'm really curious to know, like, okay, we know that there is, AI is really based off, the foundation of AI is really based off an algorithm with existing data sets, right? So leveraging machine learning to now generate what we see. But I'm really curious to know the narrative from where this is coming from, because for so long, we all know that the continent hasn't been painted in a very positive light when it comes to Western media. But then also on the other hand, documentation and data, raw data that comes from the continent isn't necessarily as I'd say mature or existent as in the developed world, right? So it almost feels like we're in this, I don't know if you watch Black Mirror, but this Black Mirror episode where, a lot of things are happening, but then there's a category of people who are trying to figure out what is happening. So there is a lot of positives, yes, that are going to emerge from, leveraging AI to one, help startups, improve productivity. There's going to be more time allocated to doing the real, maybe strategic and thinking work as opposed to the menial tasks. A lot of people are now outsourcing their work to ChatGPT. But I still go back to the who's driving the narrative and with the sort of data that now comes out of generative AI, like what narrative is it painting, or what data sets is it building its information off of, especially knowing that the data that exists on the continent is limited, or it's not necessarily true. So I'm not sure if I've 100% answered the question, or even just asked another question in my answer, but yeah, I'm curious to know how Jared looks at it from his perspective.
Yeah, Olga, I think you have, and you've actually piqued my interest when it comes to the narrative and the storytelling aspect of it. How does Africa tell its story when it comes to AI? You know, what are the opportunities there, and how do we shape that narrative around it? But Jared, I'm keen to hear your thoughts as well, and then maybe we can piggyback and bring it round.
Yeah, of course, man. And some great points that was raised by Olga, because it leans into exactly what my answer is going to be. The first thing is that when it comes to integrating AI, the lovely thing about it is that it's very much across the board, no matter what kind of company you're running or what environment you're facing. You can use AI sort of to automate some of the repetitive tasks in your administrative side of your business. Doing stuff like your client sign up or your initial client interactions. Which I find to be very helpful, because then it frees up more time for you to be doing not just busy work, but to get into why your company exists. And so I think leveraging AI to take that a burden off you is a very big plus. I also think that using AI is coming into the foreground now when it comes to monitoring sentiment. So once you've signed up your client and you're now trying to determine the quality of your product or service, AI is now assisting in trying to use the data that you have from your purchasing history and letting you know exactly where the pain points of your customer journey is, depending on the feedback from your clients. A nice point in that is that it helps you define what your resource allocation is going to look like. So where you're going to be plugging all your effort into as a company and as you develop. And obviously for startups, we know that you're quite cash strapped or resource strapped. And so you need to make sure that you're optimizing your resource allocation. So using AI for things like that is definitely, I think, a big part of integration into systems in Africa in itself. And then also just using it to improve sort of the quality of the work that you're putting out. There's some great products on the market that can assist you with developing your audio and visual content for your companies, and you can do so at a fraction of a price in terms of what it used to cost to get very expensive or a very official looking documentation for your company as well. So one of the very big positives of AI integration, and that's going to drive efficiency, is firstly, it's going to drive your productivity up, and as Olga mentioned, and secondly, it's going to drive your costs down as well.
Thanks, Jared. Maybe just to piggyback off what you said, one of the things that stood out for me is the opportunity that exists in sales and marketing, building that narrative, telling that story, because the beauty of GPT and prompt engineering is you're able to train the models based on your information, your data, so it can learn your tone, your voice. You can keep prompting it so that it gives you better results over and over again. So a really good opportunity exists there, and I'm keen to see how that can be integrated. The beauty of being at the Lawyers Hub is it transverses and cuts across the whole continent, right? And so in this next question, I'd be very keen to hear, because you're from different countries, right? Olga is in Uganda, Jared is from SA, because I noticed your .za domain name, whoop whoop. And the Lawyers Hub are in Kenya, well, headquartered in Kenya, but then really all over the continent. But I'm keen to hear whether you have any case studies or examples where you've seen AI being used innovatively within the ecosystem. I'm happy to start off and give a good example. And Rahome, if you have any others from the country, feel free to add on. Last week, when OpenAI, well, a lot has happened at OpenAI in the past 2 weeks.
A lot.
But let's put aside the corporate issues and the governance issues. But just before there were governance issues, they just launched a new feature which would allow people to build new models and new GPTs on top of what was already existing, and that was open to the public. One good example that I noted in Kenya was our leading mobile network operator. I'm not sure what the word is that they're using now because it's not dominant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a word that I think the new act sort of
framed.
Framed.
Anyway, one of our telecommunications players, one of the many, has been around for several years, and every year they publish reports on their financial performance because they're publicly listed in the Nairobi Stock Exchange. And so they do have an obligation to publish that in the open and publicly. And I know someone who built a tool on ChatGPT, which could help you scroll through all the different reports from when they were first made publicly available online, and you ask it any questions and it gives you answers based on what's in the reports. So for example, you can ask, what has this company done around sustainability, for example, in the past 10 years? How has that shifted? How have their revenues changed? You know, what has been their best performing year? And that's simply from him collating all that publicly available data, which they have put together and shared, and then build something on top of it, which is very useful and helpful to the whole community and the whole ecosystem. I highly suspect there might be some intellectual property issues, but then I do think public interest and fair use would supersede those. But I guess also there is a tool that they could purchase if they wanted to buy it off of him. But that's one good example that I think has come up from just being able to access these tools and build upon it. Wahome, I don't know if you have any examples, or we go to the screen and come back to you.
I think I'll just give a very, very sort of basic and simple example. And this is something that I am I'm guilty of, or I have been at the sort of user end, and that has been translation. So that you know, in the course of our work, we tend to come across clients who are from beyond the jurisdiction. And so what happens is that they'll typically come to you and tell you that, you know, in our home country, we've gotten this legal opinion from our lawyers, but it is in certain language. So we're going to give you this opinion. Why don't you translate it, look at what they've said, and then see how you can probably adopt that or use that to then sort of advise us as we are looking to sort of come into your country. So I feel like it's actually quite simple because, you know, of the existence of things. Even if it's not typically something like ChatGPT, even Google Translate, it's obviously based off, you know, machine learning and that thing. So it's for me a very big step, but something that can really, really help you just in terms of everyday use.
Yeah, that's a good one. Olga?
Yeah. So here, at least in the Ugandan context, there is so Makerere University, which is one of the leading universities here, is they've recently set up an AI, you know, research lab. And, you know, it's not surprising that it would start off as an academic sort of experiment, and then see how maybe certain use cases can be customized to solve certain challenges. But one of the startups and businesses, well, more startups and it's more like a social innovation, at least in the way I see it is, it's called AirQO. So what they do is that they use sensors to measure air quality and detect like air pollution. I think it's an amazing idea because, you know, I think right now the climate change, but I guess what's amazing about it is it's able to capture, you know, raw data. And with that raw data, I'd say the machine is learning. And with those data insights, I think they'll be able to now sort of look into the data, curate it, and see how to use it in a predictive sense, right? So I think that's more of a customized use case for our local context. And yeah, I think with the outcomes that the outcomes and the outputs that come from, you know, measuring the air quality, it would be able, that information can be used by the Ministry of Health to come in with some interventions. That information can also probably be used for better city planning, especially as there's conversations going towards, you know, making Kampala a smart city. So that information will be very pivotal to how urban planning is done, and also can be used in the healthcare space. So yeah, that one in particular for me is very, it's more, it addresses the hard problem, but there's a couple of startups here and there that are leveraging AI for small and medium businesses to improve their marketing. So it's not to say that they're not doing a good job, but like the ARQO is really.
Sorry, I think we lost Olga. We'll come back to her once the connection is better. But over to you, Jared. I think she's just shared a really innovative solution, which I think has a lot of impact, especially with the conversations we're having around green energy, climate change, and as she was saying, how to make Kampala smarter, and the impact that it has around urban planning. So,
Yeah.
Jared.
Definitely a nice one. Also, like you said, considering that that's where a lot of focus is going to be on now with clean tech in that. Yeah, I mean, from my side in South Africa, I think Olga's back with us now as well. Yeah, from my side in South Africa, firstly, I'd get into a lot of trouble if I didn't mention the startup that I work for. So Briefco is a cost consultancy that leverages technology in the legal profession in South Africa, reduces turnaround time on bills of costs from what was initially a 3 to 6 month period down to 5 business days. So that's one of those instances of speaking about how AI can help businesses in terms of increasing productivity by reducing the amount of administrative tasks or lessening the amount of time it takes to do those administrative tasks. Some other great startups that are coming out in South Africa, there's one called Be Secure. Be Secure is using biometric authentication. So gone are the days of just having a password be enough. It then elevated to sort of face recognition, and now Be Secure is coming in with being able to digitally tag your heart rate and use that as an authentication mechanism, which is absolutely insane just to think about. And then another startup also is one called Kenna Health. That is a startup that is a health focused startup. So making sort of just healthcare more accessible to South Africans. You're able to download an app and then completely consult with doctors, and even get your prescriptions all through these virtual consultations. And it's really increasing the efficiency within which the medical system is able to operate in South Africa, and also the accessibility. So especially when it comes to people in areas that travel would take them quite a long time, AI and tech is now stepping in to help reduce all of those sort of constraints and to bring medical access to the people in a much more efficient way. And I mean, the list could obviously go on forever. We even have Yoko, a payment system, and they use some great AI for analytics for payment portals and for payment partners as well. And so you have a series of companies that are not only giving you a product, but they're providing you with an holistic service, all based around integrating AI into their systems, which then means that you are able to benefit from it as the end user or client. So it's wonderful to see, and it's great that we have such a long list in Africa of such amazing startups and companies as well, because as you alluded to earlier, it just means that the focus is now going to be on using AI in the right sort of context and to bring us the right kind of results in society that we need, whether it be clean tech, whether it be healthcare, or whether it be our professional services as well.
Thanks for this, Jared. Olga, welcome back. We lost you there. To the attendees in the room, we're also keen to hear from your different jurisdictions, your different countries, some of what your own businesses are doing. Please share in the chat and let us know how you've seen or witnessed different organizations or entities leverage on AI across the continent for us to take note of. As we change gears, Jared, you kind of alluded to this, but I'm keen to hear, what do you think are the primary challenges or the key challenges that startups would have in incorporating AI in their day-to-day operations as compared to, let's say, larger businesses or entities?
I think the one thing that we look over when we are considering AI is just the access to AI. And then from the access, obviously speaking about the use case. So firstly, a lot of startups don't necessarily have the financial resources to plug AI into every single process that they have in their company, which I think is something that's very different as compared to your larger enterprises. But also once you are using AI, the data sets that you have access to, it means that you essentially are first going to have to focus on gathering your data and then plugging it into your AI modules in order to help train and facilitate the learning processes for your company to get that extreme level of efficiency from AI. So I think the retention of data is a very big thing. And usually the bigger and larger enterprises have the financial resources to have either off-site storage or to build up a nice facility or to partner with the partners that are very much at the top of their level and operations in terms of AI. And with startups, it's a bit more of a sensitive conversation to have. And so I think that makes startup founders and startups very much more hesitant to jump into the space of AI with 2 feet. Whereas with larger enterprises, by the time they make that decision, they've already got everything sort of sorted out to a point where they can take full advantage of that efficiency. So I definitely think that that's the two biggest considerations when it comes to the smaller startups using AI. But I also think that that just makes it all the more important for small businesses and for startups to really understand the tech that they are using and to understand the AI solutions that they are using, and to understand, more importantly, how much or what kind of advantage it can work for in their business. And to make sure that they're at the right stage of their growth to implement that and to make use of it where they find themselves in that journey.
Yeah,
Olga, I don't know if you want to.
Oh yeah, sorry. Maybe just building on Jared's point. When you've spoken about access, so access in the sense of how many the mass that can be able to access these tools and services, but also on the infrastructure side, right? Because internet in Africa is still access to internet in Africa is still very expensive, at least in the sub-Saharan side of Africa. It's still very expensive. And those who are able to access, it goes back to the problem that I had mentioned before around who is actually going to contribute towards the data pool with what the machine is learning when it comes to the AI use cases, right? So is it that we are reinforcing an existing problem? Feel free to jump in there and maybe share some thoughts around that, because with limited connectivity, there's a problem, right? So now with the rate at which AI is exponentially growing, investments are going into the technology. I'm a bit concerned that by the time it really gets down to the common, African, the African at the bottom of the pyramid, will it actually even, flow downstream, or will it still remain with the same people that have access to the devices, access to the money in order to buy data and so on, right? So that's, I think, one common challenge that I see within sub-Saharan Africa. The other one was skills, which is how many people have the capacity when it comes to understanding some of these technological, skills. So that's more on the common masses, but then also at the government level, right? Because our governments are very, very, very special. We wouldn't want to, come into a risk of hitting a wall, because there's probably certain pools of people within the government level that don't understand the possibilities that AI can help with meeting their developmental goals, and they probably just wake up one day and say, oh, we don't understand the thing, and they put a blocker to it, or they penalize maybe certain startups that are using it. So I think, alluding to what Gerard has said, it's really around the digital, limited access to, the digital infrastructure that will power the AI, but also the skills gap, especially from the government level. And we're thankful that Lawyers Hub exists to help drive some of those engagements at that level. But yeah, happy to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thanks, Olga. Wahome, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think Olga has actually rightly pointed out on how you're using artificial intelligence and how knowledge needs to flow from sort of the top all the way from the bottom. So I think I won't add much, just sort of dilute Olga and Jared's points.
One of the things I wanted to add, as Jared was speaking about the high cost of actually getting access to it and incorporating that into different businesses, was the CapEx OpEx analogy. So in our former lives, Wahome and I both worked for a tower company. And one of the things that we got to learn in how businesses are built, which also ties into what Olga was saying when it comes to connectivity businesses and last mile connectivity, is the capital expenditure. If you're founders and startup organizers in the room, then you are all aware of how difficult, painful, and intense it is to start anything new. And that's exactly what Jared was saying. It takes a lot of time, energy, and resources in even building that up for your own business and incorporating it into your business. But then you get to a point, which I call a tipping point. Well, not I, but Malcolm Gladwell. But he calls it the tipping point, where you've done all the heavy work, you've put in the heavy capital already, and then now it starts working for you and you hit a high point where you're now cruising, And I think that's one of the things that's similar when it comes to incorporating AI into your business, is to make it easier as well. Even with data collection, even for all these AI organizations and companies, it took them getting and building a lot of data, putting it together, building the large language models and other models that came up from that, and then using that and leveraging it on your business. Same thing with prompt engineering, where you keep going back to the model and prompting to give you better answers, better results, and you keep learning. So it does take a lot of time to start out, but then once you're at a good point, then you cruise at it. Maybe to transition into some of the more legal-centric issues when it comes to artificial intelligence, that is twofold. The first, data protection, data privacy, and security. What are the biggest concerns or the issues that come up with this, and how do you think startups can navigate these two issues when it comes to leveraging the use of artificial intelligence? I don't know who'd like to go first. Olga, I see your smile all the way from Kampala.
Well, I think I'll just give the generalist perspective. Masquerading as a lawyer today, but I'll just give the generalist perspective from what I've observed, at least over the years, right? So a couple of months ago, Spotify released like a song, an AI generated song. I think The Weeknd and who was the other person? And Drake, right? But it was pulled down eventually, right? So that got me thinking around, okay, from an IP stance, was that like who's the owner of that IP? Is it because they're using Drake's voice and they're using The Weeknd's voice in order to generate the song, but these two are not even aware that Spotify had used AI to generate that song. So who's the owner of that IP, right? The second, from a security perspective, is if they're using other people's voices without their permission. Sorry, I think I've just watched too much Black Mirror. I'm thinking about what are the implications from a global security level, right? Like if we're to blow it out of proportion and say, okay, geopolitics is someone's president going to call someone's president, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in in mayhem. But I think it comes down to I think AI in general has caught a lot of people's attention globally. So I think with that, it's an opportunity to now take a step back and understand what are we trying to solve, number one. Number two, what sort of skill sets are we going to need in order to solve those problems? And number three, how do we even take that step back and address some of the existing problems? Because before even AI entered the conversation, there was always this conversation around intellectual property rights, right? Copyright law, patent law, on a global scale, but in Africa, it's also something else altogether, right? So I think with the speed at which innovation is happening, I think there needs to be this intersection about thinking or about how can we have these two, regulation and innovation sort of happen at almost a proportional rate. Of course, that's very ideal, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to, take a step back and understand that with more access to technology, it means more people are going to, be able to generate content. So what that means is having conversations around intellectual property, making sure that we're equipping people at the macro level, geopolitical level, to understand these technologies so that, we're able to mitigate some of the challenges that we foresee. Because I know for sure IP, for so long we've talked about IP, but now with the emergence of technologies like this, I think there's need to accelerate some of these conversations and come up to a mutually agreeable approach to it.
Thanks, Olga. Jared?
Yeah, I think brilliant points made there by Olga in terms of, I think it's a big concern, the rate of innovation and coupling that with sort of the direction in which the innovation is flowing as well. When it comes to sort of the practical side of things, there are a few things that startups can do, and I mean this is maybe true for all businesses that are trying to rely on AI and trying to integrate AI, and they have the concern about data and privacy. The first thing is that, I know it's a very old cliche, but knowledge is power. So educating yourself on what is the latest regulations and legislation in your area of operation, I think is a brilliant starting point. That then can help you determine the baseline of where your security levels can sit at. I think also implementing things like having certain encrypted data in your structures is a very important thing to do, and then having access to that data tied to certain credentials. That then limits the inflow and outflow of information into your structures and out of your structures, and in such a way that you can very much see where that river of data is busy flowing and who has access to the river at any one point. I think also then just training your staff, making sure that they are aware of the power of what a data breach can mean for your company. I mean, for certain companies, a data breach can be the end of their reputation in the market, and it can help them. What can be the reason for them losing some very huge clients. And then I also think looking externally to your company is also a great way to make sure that you are properly prepared for any kind of data improvements. So trying to work with people who are again at the forefront of data protection, and if you have the resources to be able to collaborate with them. If not, just, I mean, many companies these days, they make use of publishing articles on what the work that they do and what the effects of what the work that they do has, and so remaining in the know about best practice will come from working with people in the data protection industry and in that area. So just putting yourself in the right environment, I think firstly in terms of a structure as the startup, to having the proper protection in place, monitoring regularly to see which credentials are accessing which information, not to snoop, but just to make sure that nothing is getting leaked. And then looking externally at privacy or data partners that are at the forefront of their field in terms of helping stay up to date with best practice and experimental going on in the industry of protection as well, I think will be some benefits to consider.
And John, if I could just, I think, just for the benefit of the participants who have signed up in the room, I think one of the course modules that we have for the program is data protection. It's actually, I think, the last course, and so that is something else that we've also identified in terms of a need for startups, and there's definitely a huge need for entities, corporations, companies, and even startups to comply with data protection requirements and regulations. So I think just sort of mirroring what Jared is saying, knowledge is actually power, and I think it's very, very critical that even for the startups in the room, they understand the dynamic and just how important understanding the concept of data protection is. So that is, just wanted to point that out, because I think I see somebody from the Q&A saying that I think they were hoping for a sort of breakdown of how the course is sort of going to progress. But just to give you a snippet, data protection is actually going to be one of the course modules that we're going to offer during the program.
Thank you for that sponsored content. Okay, let's move on to the human side of things. So one of the arguments that I hear a lot when I'm in rooms with people not in the tech field is that tech is going to take over our jobs, but even then it cannot really do a lawyer's job, especially with lawyers. You know, they say, oh, you still need the human at the center of it. Same thing with health practitioners and several different professionals. So I'm going to hear your thoughts around, for businesses and startups, how can they leverage or balance the use of artificial intelligence as a technology tool and a business tool that aids and supports the business versus the human side of things and giving their customers and clients at the end of the day a good customer experience? Olga, maybe you can start us off. How do they balance the human side of things versus the tech side of things, if at all?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I'm very, as long as we're alive, I think time will help unravel that, because right now it feels like, and again, feelings are, sometimes feelings are just deceptive, but I think we're sort of it feels like we're staring into the unknown, but what sort of gives me a bit of sanity is understanding that there'll always be problems to solve, and as many problems there are to solve, they'll need many people to solve them, right? But I think it's about understanding, mapping out what could possibly be automated in order to drive efficiency and improve productivity of the as many people part of the equation, right? I think right now there is, huge debates around the relevance of the education sector. Do we have as many educational institutions that are helping, university students, or even primary school students, or even, if we keep on going lower, to understand the emerging technologies and the opportunities that they have for them as individuals, but also how they will affect their career growth, right? So I think it's a matter of mapping out and trying to understand, okay, we know that these emerging technologies are here and they're here to stay, but mapping out the opportunity around what can be automated so that people actually using their knowledge and intellectual property in order to create and use these tools in order to be efficient, right? I know it sounds very, very, very like high level, but I think that really comes from just looking at the context of who is building, this AI technology and other emerging technologies versus who is consuming them and who is yet to consume them. Going back to, the first point that I said, that a lot of the foundation of AI is really based off machine learning, pulling existing data in order to, create and automate things to be the way that you need them to be. But on the African context, it's sort of different because there is not that much existing data to begin with, right? And the narratives and the pools of data that exist aren't necessarily accurate. So it's an opportunity to step back and say, okay, how do we actually leverage this existing technology that's here to stay to help us, go to the next level? I think a very clear example is that while the world was using the mobile phone to send messages, make phone calls, on the continent, am I allowed to say the name or one of the famous where mobile money was birthed was there was a mobile phone, and there was this urgent apparent need for people to send and receive money. So on the one side of the world, there's people just sending SMSs, making calls, but on the other side of the world, it's being used as a tool for financial inclusion, right? So again, back to as long as we're alive, I'm very curious to see how the continent will be able to leverage AI to actually solve deep-seated societal problems outside of that fear of, AI is coming to take my job, but what new opportunities can now be created because we have this sort of blank slate, but there is opportunities for us to start leveraging the data that we're building with, this increasing access to mobile technologies, the number of talent and skilled workers that are growing from the continent, right? So I think there's an opportunity to paint a new narrative in that sense. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm trying to be a lawyer today, just painting you a picture, and you'll figure it out with the response.
So you have Jared.
Yeah, I think that question reminds me of a movie that I've just recently watched called Wall Street. And in that movie, there's a quote when things are going a bit topsy-turvy, where one of the characters gets pulled aside and this guy tells him, the man stares into the abyss and there's nothing staring back at him. And it's at that point that he finds his character. And in doing so, stays out of the abyss. And I think that it ties in brilliantly with the whole conversation of AI and implementation, because flexible implementation of AI will definitely keep us away from experiencing, firstly, anything that we don't want to as a society. And secondly, it will help us to map out the future journey with AI. So I think that, as long as the intention of the creators of these programs and these LLMs and these generative tools are keeping the focus on productivity, we won't have anything to worry about. I mean, there won't be, as Olga says, the fact that we're still alive should be the biggest indication that there's a bit of a very warped perception of what AI is supposed to be doing in our society. And I think that the learning how to trust the system and learning how to trust the use of AI is going to become a huge issue. But I think how we address that is becoming familiar with it, routinely interacting with it, making sure that we're implementing it regularly in a way that we are defining the terms of implementation, and then using the resources in order to create more efficiencies in the world, such as the great innovation that was mobile money with cell phones, and using it to take our society forward in a lot of ways that we currently are not experiencing. And I think as long as that's the case of how we decide to use AI, we won't have the concern of the robots have run wild, just because our models will be properly focused on what we're trying to get right in society with that.
Thanks, Jared. I think just to piggyback off what you said, a keyword that I had you use twice was trust. My input is trust, but verify, review. Don't just take whatever output you're given and take it for face value, counter check
Exactly.
it. And I think for me as well, the importance to highlight that with any technological tool, it's supposed to make your work easier. It's complementary, think of even an axe or a hoe that you use for farming. It is an implement. It's a tool that's complementary and additional. So it's the same with artificial intelligence. It's not going to take over the whole job and will not be able to do anything by itself. But then it's an additional tool that is meant to make your life easier and to enhance your productivity and operational efficiency in the process. I'll just do a last round as we wrap it up in the interest of time. Collaboration. What opportunities do you see there for working together, collaborating, whether it's between startups, other startups, industry players, industry leaders? What does that look like in this field and in that space? And any thoughts on that?
I can go first.
Sure.
So I think I'd mentioned this before, right? Because I think Africa is still one of those unique continents where everything is political. The developing world, the developed world as well, but like us, we are very, very special, right? But increasingly, there's an interesting trend, I think, for I'll say countries like Rwanda, countries like Nigeria, countries like Kenya, there seems to be this engagement with government. And for me, before I used to say that, oh, we'll build the thing and they'll come join us as we're building it. But when they introduced the mobile money tax in 2018, which was just like one of the most ridiculous things that I'd ever heard, I was like, oh, okay, there is need to engage, because there is it's a capacity gap, which is not, the older generation who happened to be in places of government. And some, it's not to say that old causation is not correlation, right? But the rate at which technology is moving, it's moving so fast, and a couple of them don't understand what's going on. So as a safety mechanism, I think it's like, let's just tax and block this thing because we don't understand it, right? But I think there is an opportunity to engage. I know a lot of young people on the continent, we're very young and very impatient, but I think for Africa, it's really, you have to understand how to play the long game. And to play the long game, you have to engage stakeholders who essentially hold a lot of power and drive a lot of decisions. So a very clear example that has just happened in the last couple of months is, what has happened in Nigeria. Their current minister of communications, digital economy, innovation, was the CEO of CC Hub. So increasingly, I think there's going to be a trend where in order for you to propel your country to the next level, you need to engage with people who understand the technology side, who happen to be the younger entrepreneurial people. So I think there's going to be a lot of stakeholder engagement at that level, which is more founders, startups, trying to bridge that knowledge gap or help the biggest stakeholder, government, in this example, to close that knowledge gap, right? And yeah, I think it really comes down to understanding what the problems that they are trying to solve, which is, how does what you're suggesting help increase jobs? How does it help them get more taxes? I think at the bare minimum, that engagements could look like that. But then there's also this, new growing added advantage around how are we, I don't call it branding, but how are we positioning our country to be like the place where we're attracting, the best talent, a lot of investment opportunities, etc. So I think if younger people are able to package their proposition to the bigger, stakeholder, which is government, I think there is opportunities to see AI and other technologies grow. But I might just be very Afro-optimistic, so yeah.
Thanks, Olga. I like the word positioning rather than branding. Very lawyer-like. But also, as you were speaking, one of the things that I think is a good opportunity is exporting. I'm coming up with the phrasing now, but I'd like to call it ecosystem talent into different stakeholder groups. We've seen that work very well, like you're saying, with Dr. Tijani in Nigeria. We've seen different countries, and it's very interesting to see, especially across Africa, where governments are leveraging the skill and talent that exists in younger demographics, younger professionals that are already in the ecosystem, and putting them in positions of power within government to influence and make meaningful decisions. So I think that's also a good opportunity for us to build that talent and then export that ecosystem know-how into and infiltrate the ecosystem and the systems within. Over to you, Jared.
We can call it leverage the knowledge economy across Africa. I think that sounds better than export.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And it's so true that government plays a huge part in developing any kind of system that you're trying to build or structure that you're trying to build. So if we're trying to do it on a continental level, every every country needs to also be able to come through. I mean, big reason why I believe that Kenya is seeing so much attraction in terms of investment is because of the environment that's being created for investment in Kenya. And the same thing that Uganda is aiming for now in terms of how they look to externally become, this beacon of investment, or this beacon of hope in the continent. And it goes and speaks a lot to government playing their part, which I think is a brilliant point. I also think that from the startup side of things, in order to become that person that is now going to be leveraged into a different sector in the market, you need to also make sure that you're not just relying on your own understanding, that you are putting yourself in a position where you are attending events such as the Lawyers Hub's events and the webinars that Lawyers Hub puts on, integrating yourself with organizations that are focused on AI and tech adoption. And something brilliant that I only recently experienced was even joining hackathons, and to be present at places where innovation is being fostered in such a manner that it becomes an exposure for other attendees that are sitting in the crowd and watching the presentation of different business plans. So I think it's also about, working together in terms of different stakeholders, sort of being the startup founders, working with organizations, working with a government, working with everyone in terms of bringing everyone together in the same space, but then also in terms of what they do in that space, which is, your webinars, your hackathons, your informative places to interact with each other, then goes a long way to try and help increase and to foster collaboration and to take the whole movement forward of tech adoption in that space. The more people that talk about it, the more people that will become intrigued by the conversation. And secondly, the more that people will then go and do their own research on the topic, that, people will then become involved in their own, ways of touch points. Very often you find that when it comes to tech adoption in Africa, especially in like the legal profession, most of the times it's a client that comes to the attorney that says, this is what I do, or this is what I want to use, that then makes the attorney thinks about using tech. Whereas what we need to do is we need to get it to a point where startups are disruptive, and they're disruptive by nature. And so in order for you to go into an environment and to create the most disruption, you need to understand the system that you are disrupting and all of the tools that you have at your disposal. So by, surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, you're proverbially sharpening your spear for when your company or when your business goes into action, which then, helps prepare you to catapult yourself to the head of what you are doing and to become a leader at the forefront of that as a startup as well.
Thanks, Jared. Wahome, I don't know if you want to add or to speak a bit about the activities that the Lawyers Hub has had around AI, with the AI startup bill, for example, the conversations around new proposed legislation in Nigeria as well.
I think what we've really been good at is actually just being in the policy space, and what that looks like is probably hosting events. So this one is typically for startups, but what we try and do is just contribute to the conversations that are going on, and not just from a Kenyan perspective, but from a continental perspective. So we will probably do things like just map what are the existing AI regulations or policies across the continent. I think right now we have a fellowship, and we're trying to sort of see how that would look like, look at all the existing laws on the continent, because I think there was something that was shared by IAPP sometime, maybe last week, just showing the countries that have AI laws and regulations. But you could see from that map that I don't think there was any African country that was listed. But probably that may also be down to the fact that, there has not been enough engagement from a local level just to understand that, fine, we might not have laws and regulations over the line, but is there anything that we have in terms of what is coming up in the pipeline? So I think that is something that we're also big on in terms of just trying to organize conversations, whether it's through webinars, physical meetups, or just keeping track of whatever is going on in specific countries. So that is, or those are some of the ways that we've sort of tried to tap into that particular space.
So convening power.
Together.
Okay, I don't know if you can take a question or two.
I think for most of the questions, I think they've been answered as we have sort of been proceeding. Yes. And perhaps, so just maybe one of the questions that would perhaps go to the panelists. Is there's an anonymous attendee who asks, how can we possibly give legal perspective on exotic technologies that are not developed in and for Africa? And so perhaps this then touches on, I think it was the first thing that we sort of spoke about on, AI being this seemingly very, very foreign concept, and how do we then sort of localize it? So maybe if Jared and Olga could give, like a minute's comment on how they see us localizing or making AI our own, as opposed to this foreign technology that I think for the most part it has been. I will start with Jared.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question, because it's definitely something that lawyers have been struggling with in this past few months and years as AI has come and crept into Africa, because almost every development you're seeing is coming from North America, from Europe. And the problem that I normally see when it comes to any kind of practice that's been adopted in Africa is that it's not built for the African economy. So it's a bit tougher for us to then adopt it and to integrate it into our systems. There are two ways that I would say that they are the big comments of how I would normally address this. The one is to make yourself familiar with every aspect of how that piece of technology operates. And by doing so, you will then be able to see, I mean, when these technologies are built, most of the time they're taking into account the legislation of the country that they're being built in. And so what you need to do is you need to familiarize yourself with what the legal implications are of using that technology in your country is. And the reason why I say it's a very big point is because there's sometimes a difference in how I mean, when it comes to Africa, most, if not all of our countries were colonized by one country in Europe or North America or another, which means that we adopt their legal sort of understanding and their paradigm of what law is. So, I mean, it makes it very difficult when you're then using common law of one country as your goggles and looking at technology from another country. But what we need to do is that we need to see in what ways can we use it? In what ways is it maybe a bit apprehensive? Should we be a bit apprehensive? And then comes in the second part of what I would suggest is to actually get hands-on with the technology, understand if it is performing the job that it is saying it's performing, and then giving the African context to it in terms of operation. The one nice thing about technology coming from Europe into Africa, and I know I said we struggle with adoption, but it also leads to a great opportunity of how we can adopt and localize it for our structures and for our communities. So by understanding sort of the legislative provisions or the privacy policies or the usage policies of these technologies are very important. And then I would say actually interacting with him to make sure that it has application in your jurisdiction would be then the second most important thing. And again, speaks back to educating yourself and surrounding yourself with people who are using this kind of tech. Because, if I look at ChatGPT, I might only want to use it to find directions, the quickest directions to a hotel, where someone else might be able to use it to analyze data sets. Someone else might use it to create a marketing funnel for the company. And so you have these three very different uses, all for the same technology. But by chatting to other people, you then gain exposure into how they want to use it or how they intend on using it. And then that broadens your horizons and understandings of how to use it as well. So that would be my comments for that.
Thank you. Actually, very, very good insights, Jared. Olga?
Yeah, Jared took all my answers. But I think, yeah, just to allude to the point that he said, yes, which is the balance between understanding where you are and where you want to go, and leveraging, technology. Okay, so I'm optimistic, but sometimes I'm a bit cynical, right? So the cynical perspective is, nobody can stop reggae, so we're already dancing to the music. I think it's about trying to understand, okay, the music is playing. How do we customize it to Afrobeats? How do we customize it to Afropiano, right? Which is around how do we leverage the technology that exists to actually solve our problems? Which is what I'd say so the way the internet, the evolution of the internet, it was, used in the military in the US, but then they opened it up for, the general public to use it and as Gerard says, right? Which is how it has been customized to all these different use cases. So with us having that clean slate that I said, right, it would be very interesting to see how we start to write our own narratives and develop our own local use cases for this technology. I'm very convinced someone is going to develop a solution using AI that like we would have never imagined. I think we're sort of all maybe stuck in a monolithic way of thinking about how it's being used today based off the successes that we've seen, especially like in the marketing and the efficiency way. But I would be very, very amazed to see that, you know, maybe some people are now trying to leverage AI to capture maybe certain information from some trees to create a new sort of medicine, you know, because the herbal medicine conversation has been, you know, coming up here and there on the continent. I think COVID sort of showed that, okay, it's really up for debate, but I will give my local context, right? So there is a professor here that created a potent solution called COVIDX. And there was this whole debate around how does COVIDX really cure COVID and so on. But as someone who had COVID twice, I used COVIDX and it worked. And the general population, I would say about 70% of the people that used it in that period of COVID said it worked. And you know, there's a lot of herbal medicines that have been sort of put under the radar because, you know, big pharma is also a whole other behemoth to address. But I think something like leveraging AI for the development of like the Africa's medicine and healthcare sector would be an interesting use case to look at, right? Because our ancestors used herbal medicine. They didn't use the paracetamol. They used, you know, trees and other different species of flowers and so on to cure diseases. So why can't we leverage AI to do the same, right? So I'm just very, again, as long as we're alive, I think there is an opportunity to see what this technology can be able to unravel in a couple of years.
Okay. On that note, we'll bring it to a close. I'll let the panelists share their final remarks, but then also put the spotlight on them as well to share predictions for the year 2024. Just one buzzword prediction that you think might be of interest in the coming year within the ecosystem and in the space, as we share final remarks. And I hand it over back to Wahome. Olga? Okay. Oh, are you still thinking? Okay.
No. I have it. I'm like, why am I the first one to be pictured? But it's okay. It's fine.
It's a good thing.
Just one word or like a headline.
That's the beauty of going fast. You get to determine.
Okay. I think 2024 and I guess the years that come thereafter. I think this year has it's been the genesis of this defining the African narrative. So I think for the years to come, that's going to be like the theme. How do we define the African narrative? And I think technology is going to play a very key role in how it scales. And also how, you know, some of the narratives around some problems are going to be, you know, addressed. So yeah, defining the African narrative.
Okay. Jared, Olga, I'm assuming those are your closing remarks as well.
Yes.
Defining the African narrative.
Like defining the African narrative. Yeah.
From my side, I think the one bold prediction I'm going to make for maybe not next year, but that I think is going to happen is that I think one of the big agricultural industries are going to really see a push from AI that's going to put them on the world map. So either it's going to be poultry, or it's going to be coffee, or it's going to be something. AI, I think, is going to come in and really power up the African continent in terms of the world stage for how innovative we'll get in one of those subsets of agricultural production. And I think that just because of the way that our population is growing, it's going to be a necessity to increase production in agriculture. And so I think that that's going to be my one bold prediction in terms of where we're going with all of this. A buzzword, I don't know if I necessarily have a buzzword. I think it would still continue to be the same one that I picked for this year, which is big data or big data or big, however you want to say it. But that I think is going to continue into next year as we are refining, training all of these AI modules. The data is going to become it's already being called, data is the new gold or data is the new oil and that. But I really think it's going to come into a point of where the offerings for companies are going to expand. That's all going to be based on you being able to personalize an AI output with your company's data sets in a way that you can then utilize it. So I think that's going to continue as a trend as well. So I'd probably stay with big data on that.
Good choice. Safe, very safe, but good choice. Wahome, I don't know if you...
I think my closing remarks would be to answer Rosario's queries, because I think maybe some of the attendees or participants thought that we would sort of roll out the program during this particular session. But I think for this one, we really just wanted to highlight the benefit of AI, or how AI has sort of been developing on the African continent. And to a large extent, we also wanted to sort of depict how you guys in your respective, startups can sort of take on AI. I think I see somebody who has been using AI on the legal front. So I'm sure AI in your respective sort of startups has had or will have like a huge ramification. So even as we sort of move into the program or begin the program, I see one of the biggest questions that somebody has asked is, how is the program going to look like? So I think we will have our first session tomorrow, which is going to be on company formation and structuring. We would have rolled out the program during this session, but because this was sort of hybrid situation in terms of the participants, because there are members of the public that also invited who we thought would benefit from this conversation, but we will be sort of writing to you in short order, just telling you how the program is going to flow. We're having 2 sessions this week, company formation and structuring tomorrow, and then intellectual property on Thursday, which are going to be 2-hour lessons. And then next week, we also have 2 more sessions before we then sort of wrap it up for the year. And then we will then pick it up next year. So in terms of concluding remarks, nothing on the AI bit, just to answer Rosario.
Buzzword?
2024. In terms of AI.
Any.
So recently I attended it was a stakeholder engagement by AfriLabs. And so what we were trying to come up with during that stakeholder engagement was what they were calling AI or ethical AI policies, because that is a huge sort of issue that has been coming up with, obviously the growth of AI. So what are going to be the ethics around AI? So I think that because now or this year was a sort of tipping point in terms of the use of AI, maybe come next year we can then move into, so what are going to be the ethical considerations around AI? So I think that is something that might probably see a bit of traction going to 2024.
That's a good buzzword. I like it. I think for me is green-centric technologies. AI, as you know, has key impacts and effects on on climate, and climate change continues to be a big conversation. So I think even as we move on to conversations around impact investing, green investing, I think green tech-centric solutions will be a buzzword and a key conversation maker in the coming year. With that, I'll wrap it up before I hand it over back to Wahome to really wrap it up. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Wahome, for sitting here with me throughout the whole session. To all our attendees, thank you for taking the time to join in, listen, engage actively, ask questions, share comments, share some of your platforms as well and some of your learnings. We truly appreciate it. Thank you for helping us brainstorm as well and see interconnections and points of intersection whether it's in legal, tech, but then also within the startup ecosystem as well. Thank you to the Lawyers Hub for hosting us. Madam CEO Linda in absentia, come back from DC soon, but thank you for having us. Shout out to Ken, who's been seated here with us the whole time, and Dixon, who was in the team, Louisa and Rispa as well, who are hiding incognito. Shout out to them. But over to you, Wahome, to wrap it all up. Thank you.
Thank you, June. I think she has literally said everything that I wanted to say. Just perhaps to give assurance to the participants that were in today's session, we will definitely be reaching out to you just in terms of how the program is going to be structured, how it's going to look like. So please don't fret. And again, thank you, everyone. Jared, it's always nice to see you. Olga, I saw you in the Boda Boda conversation last week, but I think I was told that you've gone back to Uganda. So thank you for making time to sit into this session. Thank you, June, and thank you everyone for joining. Good evening, good night, good morning. Bye-bye.
Bye.